welcome everybody to the ICA Show. I'm joined today by three hosts, David, Brian, Andre, and Max. Three competitors at the Team East tournament in the lovely city of Parsippany, New Jersey. David, Brian, and Max, please give everybody a recap of how you did at the tournament, takeaways, and so on. How about David? We'll start with you.
I did pretty well. I got 4.5 points out of 6, including my second win at the tournament against the chess expert. However, my team did not do quite as well, with 3.5 points of the team. And that's about it.
Pretty solid individual performance. Good to hear.
Thank you.
How about Brian?
I was on board too. We had pretty tough rounds, but a highlight of the tournament was when I was able to draw a person rated 2000. It was a really intense game, and in the end, a draw satisfied me.
Also, satisfying result, yeah. And Max?
So hi guys, I'm Coach Max. So I was the third board for my team. We were actually the 4th seed in the tournament. Our average rating was about 2194, so we were definitely one of the favorites and very ambitious. And I personally did well. I got 5.5 out of 6 on the third board. And our team got 5 out of 6, and we got 4th place overall. So it was a pretty good tournament. I'm excited to show you guys one of my best games from this tournament.
Yeah, definitely a solid result, and I think everybody is, we have a treat in store in this game we're going to show. But before we do that, Max, could you give us a little bit of a background of, who you are, why we brought you here, how you got into chess, etc. I'll let you take any of those questions to start with.
Sure thing, yeah. So I got into chess when I was 8 years old, so about 17 years ago now. And I went to a summer camp. That's kind of how I got into it. I started to take some classes, and then I played in my first tournament. I didn't do so well. I was rated around 150 after my first tournament, but I kind of started to get motivated to get better, and I started to read books and things, take classes, and about a year later, I was already over 1,000. I played chess a lot when I was young, and then I kind of took some time off in high school, didn't play for a few years, kind of came back to it in college, and then I was rated around 1900 when the pandemic hit, and I started to, like a lot of people, kind of get back into chess, take things a lot more seriously. And about 6 months or so after tournaments resumed, I managed to break 2000, and I've been kind of on the grind to try to get to master, which I gladly was able to accomplish a few months ago. So
congratulations.
Very proud of this achievement, and trying to share some of my wisdom with you guys.
Nice. And I'm sure the rating will keep going up. And just one last thing before we start, I have to ask, Alan would fire me as a co-host if I didn't. Was it an ICA camp that you got your start at?
It was not. Actually, it was a different chess school in North Jersey, but I played at a lot of ICA tournaments actually coming up. Yeah, I think one of my earliest memories was winning. I don't remember what it was called back in the day. It was some ICA event, but it was like a section for under age 12. And I managed to go 4 out of 4. I think that was right around the time I was breaking 1,000. So yeah, definitely I remember playing a lot of the tournaments coming up.
Well, very nice. Okay, I guess with that, we can get started with the game. Whoops, Alan and I pressed the button at the same time. Alan, by the way, is under the weather. He is on the 1s and 2s behind the screen. I guess he has a fever or something, but he's with us in spirit. But okay, we'll start with your game, Max. You have the white.
So let me actually give you guys a little bit of a kind of an intro to get into the scene of kind of where we were at getting into this game. So this is the last round actually of the tournament. So we were actually on the second board, and we were playing against a university, Carnegie Mellon, which is a pretty good college in, I believe it's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they were a pretty strong team. So our average rating was about 2194. Theirs was maybe 2150. So their first board was like 2270. And then second and third both in the low 2200s. And then last board maybe somewhere in the 1900s. So pretty strong all-around team. And I had like one of the closest matchups. So my opponent's like 22, I think it was 22-14. I was listed as 21-61, but actually live, I was already over 2,200. So it was going to be a pretty close matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we can get into the game. So I open with E4. This is what I typically play. And he goes for the Sicilian defense, which I was expecting. I tried to prepare a little bit for him. I managed to find a little bit of intel, and I saw that he likes to play this E6 system with A6, which is called the con. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this at all, but
strange setup
optically.
I know showing this to anybody who hasn't seen it before, it's like, whoa, it seems like black is breaking every opening principle, right?
Right.
Your first bunch of moves are pawn moves, E6, A6. It looks like the dark squares are going to be weak, but it is theoretically sound. Maybe not the top of the list in Sicilians, but definitely playable.
Yeah, it's a very popular opening on the club level, and even like higher up on the GM level. I mean, the point of A6 is just to control the B5 square, so the knight cannot jump in. Because if white can kind of get in, land a knight on D6, and force black to give up this bishop, usually white is doing pretty well. At the same time, maybe black can try to look to play B5, kind of like in the Najdorf at some point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just considered to be a pretty flexible system by black. And a lot of, beginning players, or even just strong players would opt for knight C3, which seems like a pretty logical move to develop the knight. But having played this actually myself as black back in the day, I know that knight C3, black is happy to just play queen C7 and a lot of times play bishop B4, and this knight kind of gets put under a lot of pressure. So I instead like to play the system with bishop D3, actually, where you're not really committing your knight yet. And another advantage is that you could also potentially play C4 later and kind of go for a Maroczy bind setup, which we may or may not see in this game later. And he plays queen C7, which, yeah, again, kind of like Luke was saying, seems to break a lot of principles. Like, why is black moving their queen as opposed to maybe a minor piece? But an idea is to try to control the E5 square, and also just kind of a flexible move, kind of waiting to see what white does.
Does it have anything to do with preventing bishop F4?
Potentially, although bishop F4 wouldn't be as much of a problem. But let's just say, for example, like if black were to play knight F6. Okay, actually here I cannot play E5. Do you guys see why? E5 here would be premature.
Classic.
Maybe because
Queen A5.
Yeah,
Queen A5. So it actually wouldn't quite work. But the point is that later on down the line, like let's say castles, here I'm prepared to play E5. So that's part of the reason why black will play queen C7, is to kind of keep an eye on this E5 square. Maybe at some point they could even do something as kind of crazy looking as this. Mm-hmm. In some lines, they actually do this and kind of try to provoke F4, maybe even try to put pressure on this diagonal. Black has some kind of devious ideas sometimes with this queen C7 move.
Yeah, even the con is one of those very strange openings where you get to play like a computer. Just to go back to that line with, I won't dig through the PGN to find that exact position. But like this setup with queen C7, bishop D6, you even see like H5, H4 and stuff. Yeah, very strange opening. So it makes up for its slight lack in space and stuff like that with dynamic potential.
Yeah, a lot of interesting possibilities for black. Yeah. So I decided just to castle. This is still kind of part of my preparation. He plays knight F6. Mm-hmm. And this is the first kind of moment where we can sort of pause. I can ask you guys like what you think white should play. I mean, I'm still in book here, so the move that I played here, I played instantly. But just, if you guys aren't as familiar with this position, it's a good moment to kind of stop and think a little bit what you would do.
Yeah. Queen E2 did look good because it was very flexible. You could always get into a Maroczy setup. So that's why I really liked the move when I looked over the game.
Okay, so you already have a bit of an idea. But yeah, but Queen E2, so it is kind of a flexible move, but it also has a very direct kind of idea to it. What do you guys
You're thinking about E5 again, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Because with black not having as much of the center, if we're able to play E5 very quickly, and kick this knight away, this pawn on e5 can be quite useful. It opens up the diagonal for the bishop, right, for a potential attack later. So yeah, queen e2 has that exact purpose in mind. Like sometimes black will play knight c6 here, and this is already inaccurate because I'm able to take and play e5. And although the knight can jump to d5, we can potentially even kick it with c4. We can later bring the knight out, bring it to e4. Like white has a bit of an advantage already.
Mm-hmm.
So my opponent plays the move d6, which is basically just aimed at stopping e5 and accepting that he's not really going to get to bring out the dark square bishop. And he's prepared to go for more of a hedgehog setup where he might play b6 and just kind of keep his pawns on the 6th rank, but make it kind of hard for white to break through. So since black has played d6, what do you guys think? What should we go for next here?
c4 makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because since black is now not in time to stop us, we are able to kind of get a better grip on the center and play c4. Yeah, and this is considered to be the main move here. And now black is, basically going to have to go for hedgehog.
Yeah, and just to highlight, black is lacking space. One of the big themes we've seen in the past couple shows is, you're lacking space. One of the big remedies is to either trade pieces, which, okay, here it's going to be very difficult for black to do that. But just as importantly, trying to find pawn breaks, right? So d5 is black's main break in this position, followed up by b5 in some lines as well. But yeah, Max, your entire setup here is preventing black from really ever playing d5. You have, of course, this classic Maroczy bind, but also the queen lined up. Even if this is still theory, this seems like a very unpleasant position for black, or at least one, that can go wrong very quickly.
Yeah, it's certainly, I'm very happy to see this line whenever black is going for it. But actually, surprising enough, my opponent had prepared something here.
Mm-hmm. So
I see we're having a question.
In the chat, somebody's asking, after d6, can you play f4?
So f4 is an idea that I still want to go for later, but here f4, maybe black can kind of grab some space on the queen side with b5. Like, yeah, it's possible that maybe we could get e5 in here. Maybe black could even play like knight d7 first, just to kind of get a clamp on. Like f4 is also not a bad idea, but f4 isn't going anywhere. We can always play f4 later, but c4 is kind of more important to get in first, just to make sure you have a good grip on the center. I play c4, and here usually black will just play bishop e7 and castle. Sometimes they can play knight c6. My opponent played knight d7, so I thought, okay, this move still looks normal because he could play bishop e7 next. So I just develop, and now comes the first surprise of the game. We see the move knight e5. So very unexpected that black is deciding to move this knight twice, but the point is immediately clear, right? He wants to get rid of the bishop. And I can't really drop back, right? Because the pawn on c4 is hanging. So this was the first moment where I had to stop to think. And I would definitely like you guys to
I have to ask. The move before, did you see that knight e5 was a possibility, and were you prepared to accept the trade? Or
that's a good question. Yeah, because I could have maybe played f4 to prevent knight e5, but then there's also maybe knight c5 is possible. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to develop my pieces. If my opponent wants to spend a bunch of moves moving the same piece over and over again, I'm not going to stop them. But at the same time, knight e5 is a bit problematic because, why should we give up this bishop if we don't have to? But now you kind of have no choice. So you have to be prepared to do that and kind of find the right idea to continue in the meantime. So what do you guys think? How should white continue here?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple healthy-looking moves. F4 is...
I was thinking about f4.
Right, so f4 is obviously the most kind of logical or principled move, you could say.
I'd also consider b3, because if you're losing your square bishop, it makes sense to put all your pawns on the light square.
Also a good idea, David. Yeah, so That's one of the reasons actually why I wasn't so scared to give up this bishop, is that if we think about the position structurally, yeah, most of my pawns are going to be on light squares. So this bishop isn't really the best piece in the world. Like, there are some cases where white can play f4, and if they get e5, and they can open up this diagonal and go for something very kind of direct. But in a lot of cases, the bishop on d3 is not that great of a piece, so I was okay with giving it up. So f4 was definitely something that I thought about. What I kind of was a little bit unsure of is if my opponent plays this move queen d6.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I take right away, they're going to take my knight with check and then pick up the pawn on e5. That doesn't look so good. And okay, if bishop e3, so actually the funny thing is that what I saw during the game was take, and I wasn't really sure if they can grab this pawn on b2. It looked a little bit wrong, but I didn't see a direct refutation, although funny enough, there's a very
Knight d5, right?
very simple move. Knight d5 is interesting. It's very direct, but actually,
Yeah, okay.
knight c2.
Ah, very nice.
And the queen has
oh,
no
that's even
escape.
worse. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so this is something that I unfortunately did not see, but actually, there is another interesting move here with this knight g4, which is actually a lot more difficult for white to kind of deal with, because bishop is hit, right? This is definitely a bishop we don't want to lose, because then this diagonal could be a problem. So then you kind of have to play knight a4, and the position is very unclear, I would say.
Yeah.
So another thing that maybe you could play is just a kind of a slow move, like maybe king h1 or h3, just kind of stopping knight g4 and then preparing to play f4. But I decided to play the move b3, actually, because I had the same kind of idea as David. Although this move does turn out to be quite a serious inaccuracy. And that's another question, is can you guys figure out why this move is not so good here? What's the problem?
Yeah, here it looks like there's b5.
Yeah, b5. Right? Because the
yeah,
knight.
Or even
exactly
d5.
Right. This is something that
maybe not d5. Okay, that's a bit much.
Surprisingly, my opponent and I both kind of missed this move b5.
Yeah.
And the whole point is that, very simply, I have no longer, or I've moved the pawn. I'm no longer defending the knight. So this is not possible, right? Because the knight's going to hang. But if I can't take, then he's about to take and basically leave me with this weak kind of pawn on c4, which is a little bit unpleasant. So if black finds b5, already they're doing quite well, and maybe even slightly better.
Mm-hmm.
Because the plan, the
go ahead.
line is to go for a break like b5 or d5. So they already kind of accomplished their goal.
Yes, yeah. Plus they can then weaken the pawn and then play bishop b7, rook c8, and long term it's going to be quite difficult for me to kind of monitor this pawn.
Yeah.
So yeah, fortunately for me, he also did not see this, and he just thought, okay, I'll take the bishop.
Yeah,
and,
which
I take back. And
which also seems like a very strange decision. Like, okay, before when we were talking about f4, the logic was, oh, maybe it's a little bit premature. It's always in our back pocket. It's, not going anywhere anytime soon. This seems like a similar pattern where,
right,
okay, it's not like you're going to play bishop c2 or something and decide, you're not going to let him take the bishop.
Well, I think that's probably what he thought, is that I would play bishop c2 next. And that's honestly what I was thinking. But again, is this move b5?
I could see that.
So I think that we simply both just kind of, I don't know. It's the last round of the tournament. That's something important to kind of take into consideration. I mean,
yeah.
It's a pretty grueling event, and this is already the last game, and maybe not everyone is firing on all cylinders. So
a weird part about knight takes bishop maybe is, if we look, I believe that it was knight bd7, knight e5, and knight takes d3. So 3 moves by the exact same knight. So I'm not sure that's a great idea for black, because they moved their knight 3 times in a row.
That is true, yeah. And certainly he didn't have to take right away. He could have waited, at least, for me to play f4. But okay, yeah, he really wanted to get this bishop off the board, so that's what he did. And then he basically just continued with his sort of hedgehog plan. He plays bishop e7. And so now I finally do play f4, because, yeah, this is one of the ideas, is to kind of gain a bit of space, looking for some potential pawn breaks later on to try to take a dig at black's structure.
I have a question.
Sure.
How confident were you in this position considering that you no longer had the bishop pair and your opponent pulled something on you that you didn't entirely expect. And,
Okay, good question.
did you see
So-
b5 after you played b3? Or did you just not see it?
Well, that I didn't realize during the game. That was something that I realized after. But I will tell you what I was thinking. So there are basically two main plans in this position. So actually, let me just go back a little bit. I want to just quickly show you guys what often happens in this setup. And I'll kind of use that to explain the plan. So let's say f4, castles. Usually I'll play like a prophylactic move, king h1. And okay, if we get a position like this, there's basically two plans for white. One plan would be a very direct kind of kingside attack would be to play rook e1 and try to play e5, in which case we get to open up this bishop, and that's where it actually will have some potency. Oftentimes the knight will drop back and reroute to g5, and we can go for some kind of a kingside attack. The other plan is a little bit more positional, although it also has some kind of aggressive features, and that's to play f5. Because then you're really taking a stab at this pawn. Black will often meet that with e5, and this knight will drop back. And now the point is that we've kind of loosened up this d5 square, maybe for the knight to jump in. But at the same time, here white has also some ideas like g4, g5 to attack. So I kind of like both of these plans. They each have their place. But if we jump back to our game,
you don't have a bishop, so
in this
putting
game,
on the
which
light
plan is going to
help.
be applicable here? What do you guys think?
Definitely f5.
Right,
Yeah.
because now e5 without a bishop any longer, it doesn't really make so much sense, because another kind of drawback of the e5 plan is, let's say, yes, we do get this in. But the problem is that now after this trade, the pawn becomes weak. And if we cannot, compensate for that with some kind of an attack against the h7 pawn, it might not really work out so well, right? Because pawn is going to be weak long term. Bishop might come here, create a pin. So black will get a sufficient bit of counterplay, right? Plus this bishop is now open.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely the plan with f5 is the one that I want to go for. So I didn't do that right away. I wanted to just patiently develop. Like, obviously this bishop on c1 has many places it can go. Maybe b2, maybe d2, e3. I decided to just put it on d2 because I thought this is kind of the most flexible. I don't block the e file, but I also don't necessarily commit to put it on this diagonal. So I thought this was kind of just an okay plus spot for the bishop. He goes b6. And now I did give it away earlier, but we don't have to rush with f5. We can just be a little bit prophylactic here, take our time, right? The move's not going anywhere. That's why we just do something to make sure that everything's taken care of, right? Because, yeah, it doesn't seem like this diagonal is going to be much of an issue, but you never know. There could be some check later on down the line. So we just tuck the king away. And after he plays bishop e7, we're finally prepared to execute the plan, right? So f5, right? Especially now that he's moved the bishop, because now I'm really threatening to take here.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously he doesn't want to backtrack. He plays e5. Okay, so this is the question right here.
Bishop e7 was inaccurate?
I think it's still fine because the bishop does have some purpose here, right? It does put pressure on the e4 pawn, but yeah, now he has to basically accept a structure where he's giving up the d5 square, and this kind of leads into another good question, which is, where should the knight go? This is obviously something I had to already consider before I played f5, but what do you guys think? Where should we bring the knight back to?
Definitely e3.
I was thinking maybe
right?
c2 e3 or even c2 b4 for knight d5 maybe.
Right. Yeah, very good thinking, guys. So as soon as you see the d5 square open up, we're immediately thinking about sort of sending our pieces that way. And, knight f3, maybe not the worst move, but yeah, knight c2 is exactly what I was thinking, because we want to reroute and have the opportunity to come here. Plus, even with the knight on e3, I was even thinking maybe that could help to set up something like g4 and go for, again, some kind of a kingside attack. So I was pretty happy at this point because I thought, yes, I provoked him to kind of weaken the d5 square. And, I'm going to go knight to e3 soon. But he actually found a very good move here, which, of course, would have been better if you had found it sooner. But he did find the move b5.
Yeah, sharp.
Which on the surface looks like he's giving up a pawn. So what is really his idea behind this? What do you guys think? What happens if we take this pawn?
If we take
e4 hangs.
yeah, e4 hangs. It's a
It'd be a
weak.
massive
right,
trade
and
with the knight
the thing
taking
is,
on
though,
c7, he takes on d3, and the rooks would get traded, and it would go into an endgame, basically.
which is true, but actually there's even a simpler move Black can play here without kind of having to calculate any of these complications. He can simply play queen c6.
Yeah,
And we don't have enough pieces because pawn's under attack 3 times, right? So we don't
And
have any
there's
way to sufficiently defend. And although we do have 2 passed pawns on the queen side, but the problem is that the center is about to blow open. Black is going to have a lot of pressure this way, and you might not make it to an endgame. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to deal with Black's kind of surge of piece activity.
Yeah, and there's also
Yeah.
maybe bishop a6 pinning
And
the.
I think this actually ties in pretty nicely to a chat question.
Mhm.
Daniel asks, didn't Garry Kasparov write in his 4th series of My Great Predecessors that playing f5 in these positions is always bad? And I think this is an example of a situation where this f5 plan goes wrong, where you release the tension in the center, and the base of that mini chain you're building breaks down. That's a typical drawback of this f5 plan. Is the e4 pawn often becomes a little bit soft, but I'm not super familiar with what passage you're talking about.
Yeah, that is an interesting point.
Yeah.
During the game,
Yeah,
I definitely
okay.
thought this was good, but in hindsight, I did overestimate the position a bit and kind of didn't give Black as much credit for the counterplay that they can stir up here. So it's an interesting point, but yeah, we get b5. And so I thought, okay, I cannot take the pawn, right? So let me play knight e3, just bringing the knight to its kind of rightful destination. And so this is where both my opponent and I started to spend a lot of time during the game because, yeah, position is a little bit unclear, right? Because I do have kind of this bind of d5. Knights are heading this way, but he does have a bit of counterplay here. And actually, one of the big themes of this game is on kind of keeping the tension and whether Black should take on c4 or not. What do you guys think? Like, should Black take on c4, or if not,
Yeah.
what else should they play?
It feels like you kind of have to here.
Yeah.
Like, as Black, again, you're sort of limited in space. You have the bishop pair. You got to open up the position, right? That light squared bishop for the moment is a little bit passive. It's behind this e4 pawn, but the other side of that coin is, well, okay, it's behind a pawn, but it's also targeting it, right? So as white, you're going to be constantly, glued to the defense of this pawn. And if you're taking here, right, okay, trading queens should be fine for Black. Actually, that looks pretty bad. You're allowing a d5
Right.
break.
Yeah, I was thinking just to take back with the pawn.
Okay, yeah, and if you're going to take
Yeah.
with the pawn,
That
even
That
like
looks the most natural. But
e-
then
e- even
maybe
something like this,
a
I
rook
feel
could come
like
to
is
c8 or something
coming in.
and add pressure, and it might be a little hard to hold down. So
Yeah,
I think
or maybe-
taking is probably a strong answer.
Right. So taking, actually, yes, he definitely had an option to take, and he should have done it sooner rather than later. I'm not sure about knight d7 right away, just because now
right
I will
away
play
knight d5, yeah.
and he can't. The whole point is that he should play a move such as just rook c8 or rook d8 here, something kind of patient, putting a little bit of pressure. But the moment that I play knight d5, he can just take twice. And now the c file opens up for him, and this is going to give Black enough counterplay that they shouldn't be worse here.
Yeah, and
So
just
I would in turn also have to kind of stay patient, maybe moves like rook b1, rook c1. But yeah, Black has weakened this pawn. They've also potentially cleared the b file for their rook. And in terms of kind of equalizing, they're on a good path.
Yeah,
But,
I would already take Black.
It's always easier said than done, right? And my opponent is thinking, okay, we're told to keep the tension a lot of times because the take is a mistake. And maybe that's what he was kind of thinking at the time. He didn't want to rush to capture. He decided just to play rook fc8, which is still fine, putting some pressure on the pawn. And this is a moment where I started to think about, can I get some kind of an attack going? Can I play g4 and stuff? But, it looks good at first, but it's not that simple because Black can, of course, play h6. And if I lunge forward with h4, they can drop back with the knight. Now this pawn is hanging. Very unlikely that I'll get to play g5, right? And even if I play something like knight d5, they do have queen d8. And I'm very much risking overextending here, right? Because now I pushed all the kingside pawns. If things don't go according to plan, it's just going to be all the more fuel for black's kind of counterattack. So I said, okay, I'm not going to.
This does not feel like what you want at all.
Yeah, we don't want to create too many weaknesses for black to later exploit. So what's kind of a patient move we can play here, just keeping control?
Maybe
Rook A1, something like
one.
I was thinking Rook C1.
D1.
Yeah, because
Rook C1, sure.
I have the idea to maybe play Knight D5 at some point, oppose black's queen, right, and not allow them to kind of bring their queen into C2. So I played Rook C1. Another moment where black could have taken. Here I would have even the option to perhaps take with the knight. But even still, black should be doing okay. Again, there's an idea with now Knight D7, Knight C5.
Or like
Maybe
A5.
even, yeah, maybe A5. I mean, it does give up the B5 square, but maybe it's worth it just to get A5, bishop A6. But again, he was keen on keeping the tension. And he played kind of a prophylactic move here because he sensed that I might go Knight D5, so he played the move Queen D8.
Yeah, which feels very slow.
Yeah. I
It
thought it was
does feel a bit slow, yeah.
I thought
It feels almost counterproductive to bring the queen off of pressuring the C file.
Yeah. Also, like at B takes C4, Knight takes C4, at maybe black can go A5, and after like something like Bishop G5, there could be something like Knight takes C4 after Bishop G5.
Yes, that's possible. Yeah, so Knight takes C4, Knight takes, and if Bishop takes, then you want to take on G5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that can definitely be possible.
Takes D4, Bishop takes C7.
So
After
we're
Bishop
saying
takes
here.
C7, after Bishop takes C7, I think Knight takes C3.
Mm-hmm.
Then Bishop takes
Yeah,
D6.
yeah, it does get a bit murky. You have to calculate these kind of things very precisely because
Yeah.
it can definitely go wrong if you kind of mess up.
But then
I mean, after Bishop D6, there is this move Queen C6.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe black can make this work.
yeah.
But yeah, the general idea is that, yeah, black should try to open up a bit of room on the queen side for them to look for ways to get counterplay. And I think he had a different idea in mind with Queen D8. And we're going to see it in action pretty soon, is that he was looking at the potential kind of reroute of the knight without allowing Knight D5 with tempo. And also, once he moves this knight, he was thinking to maybe bring his bishop out to G5. Because this bishop is black's kind of most passive piece. So if he can manage to maybe trade it for my bishop, he would definitely be happy to do that. So I thought for a while here myself, because of course the Knight D5 is always tempting, and I'm not sure should I finally go for it or not. And I decided, okay, let's go Knight D5. And of course, I have to be prepared for when he takes. Do I take back with knight? Do I take back with pawn? You know, what are the best kind of trade scenarios here? Just not easy decisions to make. And I was expecting him to take with the bishop. And what I was looking at is knight takes, because if pawn takes, I thought this was also possible, but I wasn't really sure where this knight would then be going. Like, I can try to bring it around to c6, but even if it does reach c6, in the meantime, first of all, he's going to get knight c5 in. He's going to get bishop g5 in. It just seems very slow for me, and it seems like he's able to accomplish his plans kind of in a more quick manner. So I thought, okay, I can also take with the knight, in which case we would get a structure like this, where maybe this is a little bit more suitable for me, where we can kind of fight over the c file. But again, he's going to get bishop g5 in and perhaps succeed in trading off his worst piece. So he should have, in the big scheme, taken, but he actually made the first kind of serious mistake of the game. He played the move knight back to d7, which, again, is kind of in line with his plan. He wants to play knight c5. But this is where you guys come in. I want you to think about, I mean, maybe you've already seen the move here for white, but if not, think about
have,
what white
unfortunately.
should.
Yeah, I also have.
Yeah, so as soon as I saw this move, so I saw, right, he can try to come to c5, but you have to sort of sense the drawbacks behind your opponent's moves as well. And one of the drawbacks is that he's kind of a little bit cramped here. Like, his pieces are starting to step on each other's toes a little bit. And before he's able to bring out his bishop, I found a move here, which of course he didn't see coming. And that is the move bishop to a5. So the idea is, of course, deflection, which is an important tactic here, right? The point is that if he does take this bishop, we are not only going to win the bishop back, but it's, of course, a fork, right? And he's going to lose the rook.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't take, what can he do? If he plays queen e8, again, I have a fork. I can play now knight c7. So his only move, he's forced to play this very passive move, queen f8. Okay, so after queen f8, what do we think here? Because the sequence of moves that I found was good, but not necessarily the absolute best. So this is a good moment to kind of stop and think, maybe consider some different ideas. I see that we're also getting a question in the chat about why this is such a good position for white. The way I felt during the game is because when he moved his knight back to d7 and he kind of allowed me to bring the knight into d5, I have kind of like a temporary window of opportunity where I can now use the unopposed knight since he can't trade it off, right? Even if bishop takes, we have another knight take back. We have that as an opportunity to create a lot of threats, right? Like there's the forks as an idea, which we saw. There's also another idea, which, again, if you guys have seen this game, then you might have an idea of what I'm referring to. But with the
I'm
knight,
afraid I know exactly what you're thinking. But
yeah,
if I try to forget that, if I try to forget that, I have to think about that black is probably thinking about how to get rid of their bad bishop. And by bringing it to g5, they could be rather annoying, trading it for the e3 knight and getting some space for themselves.
Right.
To
and also
play against that.
Yeah.
If we look at it more from my perspective, I want, if I'm kind of the one who is now seizing the initiative going forward, I want to then use that to start some kind of an attack. How do I do that? I need to get as many of my pieces into the game as possible.
Yeah.
And what I have here is a situation where I have one pawn, which is actually hindering two pieces from becoming active. And we're, of course, talking about this pawn in f5, because if I manage to get rid of it, like if I could just make this pawn disappear, I'd already be much, much happier, right? The rook would be open, knight could jump into f5. So f6 is now a very serious idea here, which actually I could have immediately played here.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that, okay, how does he take? Well, let's say he takes the knight, right? Maybe most natural. What do you guys think? What do we do next?
It takes winning d6.
Do we take the bishop or do we take the knight?
Yeah, I
fair.
guess
We
take
take
on
the
e7 and knight f5.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I was thinking during the game as well.
Or
Yes.
even better, take on f6 and then sacrifice the exchange
You
on
want-
f6
yeah,
and play
yeah.
knight d5 and attack the king side. Would that
Yes,
be a possibility?
this is actually a very strong sacrifice. Now, what you have to see is that even when you land the knight on f5, it looks pretty, but you can immediately recognize that queen g3, okay, but the queen guarded g7, right? So we're not going to mate them right away.
But you could use the bishop from a5.
But bishop d2,
Ooh,
bishop h6.
Exactly. Yes. And that is something which I didn't realize yet. I picked up on this idea a little bit later, but here it would have been very strong to do this because with a simple idea like bishop d2, black is up the exchange, but they're helpless against this idea. They have very little control in the dark squares. And once the bishop comes in and we can kick out this queen, going to be very difficult for black to survive this attack.
Yeah, classic situation where the queen looks like it's defending, but it's actually preventing any of the pieces that you could use in the defense, like a rook. You can give up a rook for a knight and a bishop. Queen, not so much. Can't do that. So a lot of times you have a situation like this where the queen, it appears to be a strong defender, but it's actually blocking the other pieces from joining the game. Like if you could play rook f8, g8 rather, you'd be okay. But yeah,
Right.
This is I think a very nice idea.
Yeah, and earlier we had someone in the chat mention Kasparov. There was actually a quote that Kasparov's coach told him when he was young is that the queen sometimes is actually the weakest piece on the board because anytime it gets attacked, it has to move, right? So this is a case where when I play bishop h6, the queen is going to have to spend a tempo moving, and that's going to leave the king basically just wide open.
Yeah. So, and knight on f5.
Very, very strong opportunity.
A lot of Kasparov insights today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So during the game, I was thinking more about the whole knight f5 idea, which is why I decided to actually take the bishop and then play f6.
Mhm.
which is still good, but yeah, maybe not quite as strong. But yeah, this definitely gives my opponent, again, a lot of practical difficulties here because he's not sure, should he take and how? Should he move his queen? But then maybe he allows f takes g7. So he thinks for a while. As it turns out, the best move was to just play knight takes f6. Although, what do you guys think? The move is obvious, right? We want to play knight f5 because we threaten to take the queen to check. But the two moves that I was considering here are queen e6 and queen d7. So if queen e6, what should we do?
I mean,
I would have to say
even
queen
knight
takes
d6 is working now.
Yeah.
So yes, knight takes d6 is what I was thinking, right? Because we attack the bishop and the rook, and not so easy for the rook to defend the bishop, right? Because there's no rook c7. And there's no rook b8 because of this.
Yeah.
So to me, it looked like if black allows us, he's going to have to be prepared to give up the exchange, which of course should be in white's favor. Although at the same time, what we have to understand is that the knight right now is basically the only thing holding the e4 pawn together.
Yeah. Also, like the b5 pawn now suddenly becomes very, very weak.
Yeah. So let's say like black maybe trades this. They're going to have to find the right way to part with the exchange. And it's going to be good, but the thing that I was a little bit concerned about
would
is,
rook d8 be a move?
Say that again, David?
Would rook d8 be a move?
So rook d8, the thing is that they can give this up, but I can always back the knight up with c5. Yes, it's true. Maybe they can take here now. But still, this knight is quite stable on d6. All I really need to do is move the queen. But yeah, this is an example where maybe black can dream of some kind of counterplay, right? Because this bishop does have a good diagonal. I was a little bit concerned even if, let's say they play something like this, and then I take, but now the pawn is hanging. Now, it's true that I do have queen d8 check, which is probably what makes this variation not really work for black. Because if they could get this bishop takes c4 in, or even knight takes c4, if it wasn't for queen d8, which kind of forces black to retreat and looks very ugly, right? I even have knight e7 picking up the rook. Maybe black could dream of some kind of counterplay, but probably this is what my opponent didn't like about this whole thing, is that he looks like he's losing an exchange. Counterplay looks a little bit slow. Queen d7 was actually also interesting. Although here, what we both thought is that actually instead of taking on d6, there's a stronger idea for white. What do you guys think that is?
Maybe
Perhaps
c5.
c5.
Pawn c5.
C5,
but pawn c5,
d5.
maybe I'll take on e4. Right? With knight or maybe with bishop. Think a little bit more direct. How do we attack here?
Yeah, go for
Queen
the rook
g3,
lift.
maybe?
Queen g3.
Knight
Yeah, that's what we were thinking. Queen g3.
Oh, that too.
If black, how do they defend? Either g6 or they have to play something very passive like knight e8. If they do play g6, so one variation that I was thinking about during the game is knight h6 check. And then I was even considering sacrificing the rook here to bring the other one over.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Which
even like queen h4 there looks very strong.
and is also a possibility. Yeah, and if I just wanted to point out maybe even queen h4 here can be good. Because if the knight moves, we have knight e7 check. And if they take the knight, we can take theirs. And now, again, the king is wide open. We have ideas of check. We have ideas of rook lift. Possibly even
take
even a world where maybe rook although rook takes f5, black does have knight takes e4, which might kind of be a bit of a roadblock.
I feel like
I
there
would
must be
want to
something
allow
there.
this, but
Yeah, I guess
there's
that
definitely some ideas lurking.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe the most precise is to give check first and then take the knight. Kind of force the king onto a bad square. Anyway, my opponent thinks for a while here, and he does not take. And also, we should mention if he takes with pawn. Now again, I have this knight f5 idea.
Yeah, that looks really
this
bad.
is where I actually started to kind of realize, wait a minute, I have something with bishop d2, bishop h6. Yeah, could be very strong. So he decided to play a different move, which looks very interesting. Knight to c5.
Yeah, which is sharp.
Yeah, very complicated because obviously if I take his queen, he takes my queen. And it looks like this pawn can be very strong, right? I was even thinking, wait, what if I go bishop d8? He has to sack his rook. Oh, no, he doesn't because he has bishop c6. And although I block him from kind of getting to the pawn, at the same time...
What about like rook takes f7 here?
Say that again?
I don't think that...
Actually, never mind. Rook takes f7, king takes f7, rook f1, and then knight f4 would...
Yes, yeah, that's a very interesting idea, though. I didn't think of that, but you want check. But even I can maybe go
knight f4,
king g6 potentially, right? Because black can always give the exchange back at the right moment.
That's true.
Yeah,
maybe it's a little too aggressive.
I mean, even rook d1 there, right? And d6 after bishop c6, rook d1, and yeah, bishop d8, bishop c8.
Right.
This seems slightly problematic.
But then black can go like knight c5. Yeah, it's unclear because, well, what you're saying is this.
Then like knight f5. Yeah, or taking right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, this looks good too, but I guess what you did in the game is also very strong.
Yeah. I mean, it's even possible that black could actually sacrifice this, and it's not even that bad because, again, this is a weak pawn. Yeah, like white should be better here, but I felt like the best chances practically are to keep the queens on because I'm attacking. So I started to think about where would it make sense for the queen to drop back to? What do we think?
E2, D1. I want to be able to swing over.
I was thinking about E2 because you can go queen G4, queen H5 whenever needed.
I would want it to stay out of a spot where you can capture it with tempo. So E2 and D1 avoid,
I guess, E2
a lot of that shenanigans.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't want to put the queen on D2, right? That's one that's kind of easy to rule out because it allows knight E4 with tempo.
And I would say that E2 is slightly better than D1 because D1 unconnects the rooks.
Yeah.
Yes, and also, so I was originally thinking to go to D1. The reason I decided on E2 was because what my next idea is that after he now moves his queen or takes, when I move this knight, my queen will help to support the E4 pawn. And my whole thing was that, you know, when you're attacking, it's still important not to allow your opponent to get a lot of counterplay because that's an easy way you can lose control or even, you know, allow some counter chances, end up losing. I didn't want to let my opponent take this pawn because then the bishop would become open. There's even some crazy variations, like just to show you guys an idea of, like, okay, obviously, yeah, they have to take the pawn or maybe move the queen, but let's just say in some crazy world, what can happen is there was some tactics like this with knight g3, where if I take, there's this queen h3 check because of this pin. Obviously, it doesn't quite work because I do have king g1, but like these are enough to kind of scare you, right? Like you don't want to potentially allow some kind of crazy combination that could allow you to get mated when you're the one that's supposed to be attacking. So I said, okay, let's just make sure we don't allow any kind of tricks. Let's just go queen e2. He, again, doesn't want to take because knight f5. So he plays queen d7. So another interesting moment here, right? Obviously, we have the option to take, but again, then he could take on e4. So it's kind of a question of where to move the knight. Do we want
D5,
to
lock
jump
the bishop.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Because knight f5 very possibly could also work. But I thought if we can move the knight to a good square and also block his bishop and make sure he doesn't take this pawn, looks pretty good, right? Plus, I was starting to get low. We were both starting to get a bit low on time. There's only move 24, but we each have maybe 15 minutes or something like that. Because
I have to ask, what taking tabs on how your team was doing? Like, was this shaping into a must-win situation or anything?
That's a good question. So at this point, I think our first board might have already made a draw, and he was playing white, so it's already kind of not so much in our favor. The other boards look very much unclear. So yeah, it felt like a win would definitely be great because that would put us in an advantageous position. Plus, I'm the only remaining game on our team with the white pieces. So yeah, it puts a bit of a burden on me, but I already felt like I had a good position. So no added pressure really, just trying to stay in the zone. So yeah, go ahead.
No, so
okay. So knight d5, of course, the red is knight e7, right? So he feels obligated to take. And I decided to take with the c pawn. E pawn also would have been fine, but again, I didn't want to allow any potential counterplay. So c takes. And this is a moment where, yeah, the pawn sort of continues to sit on f6 and annoy my opponent, right? Because it's like the pressure of, potentially your kingside structure getting ruined is just so great. And so he has to make a decision whether he wants to take or play g6. And of course, he decided to play g6 because he didn't want to make his king wide open. I thought that perhaps he should take, though, because once he did play g6, this pawn is just so strong here that I thought the game is practically over, especially since he doesn't have a dark square bishop to kind of defend the g7 square. If he had taken, it still is quite dangerous for black, again, because of a very similar idea of what we discussed before, which is
Bringing the bishop around.
Bringing the bishop, right? I was thinking not even to take the pawn, but to just drop back. Because if you take, maybe black can play knight b7 with ideas to take, ideas to trade. But very patient move, bishop d2. This pawn is not really going anywhere. It's going to be very difficult for black to keep a hold of. So definitely would have been still a good attack here.
Could black have considered playing king g7 after bishop d2 just to keep you out and then get a rook on
then
the
queen
h?
h5.
The thing is, then I can already play something like queen h5, I believe.
Yeah, you're sort of.
Or maybe even something like rook
digging
f3,
your
rook
own
g3,
grave.
right, to not give up the pawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas here. It's very difficult for black, or even queen e3, queen h6.
Same concept.
Right?
I
Because
feel like at this point, though, black is fighting for the draw.
yeah, if the knight cannot get in via e4, then it really has no capability to defend whatsoever.
What
So-
about something like b4 maybe to maybe postpone the attack for a second, but you just kick the knight away and then the attack's still coming very soon?
You could consider kicking the knight, but I wouldn't even
Yeah.
want to allow any kind of c-file pressure, right? This knight really doesn't have any great squares. By the time the knight jumps in anywhere, I think the king will already be close to getting mated. So I wouldn't really worry about this too much and just go for more of a direct attack here.
I think
There's
that
certainly many things white can do.
relates to a question that's coming up in the chat, which is how to recognize and eliminate counterplay.
Right.
How do you spot where that's coming from? And I think a move like b4 is a very nice example of sort of trying to get too smart with the position and inadvertently giving up squares that you might not realize will become important later down the line. So Elizabeth Roman.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually,
Yeah.
I can say from personal experience, this is something that I think that I've improved at, and I've consciously tried to improve that, because on the road to master, I had many games where, I would get off to a promising attack, be close to winning, and then maybe underestimate some resources that my opponent had and suddenly allow counterplay and then end up drawing the game or even losing. So I think you just have to be very aware, even when you feel like you're attacking, that's one of the reasons why I opted for this knight d5 move here, just to not give my opponent the option to take the c4 pawn, right? Like if you plug it in the computer, it might very well say knight f5 is stronger objectively, but if you can't calculate every single line, knight d5 just seems more practical because you don't even give your opponent the option to take and, make things kind of tricky for you. It's just all one-way traffic. We keep the bishop out, we keep the knight out, and the attack continues. So after g6, this is another general moment, right? My opponent is thinking that maybe, I kind of shored up the king side. Maybe I can start to consolidate, but I felt like we have to keep going, right? There's a pawn on f6. There's a potential idea to mate on g7. Although, if we just stop to think about it, right? Okay, what if we play queen e3? What's black going to do?
Queen e8.
He'll play queen e8, right? We play queen h6. Yeah. He plays queen f8, right? He's in time to defend. So what does that tell us?
We must
bring in something else.
We need some more firepower, right? We're not going to be able to mate with just the queen. So what is that piece that's going to be of use?
Bishop.
The bishop.
Could be a bishop.
If you
rook
send the
lift,
bishop into
yeah.
G7, then have the queen sack on H7 with a rook lifted, you could get a checkmate like that.
That's a very nice
Even-
idea. Yeah.
Even if
but,
that's a little fancy.
but in that idea, which piece is kind of more important to bring in first is a good question. Because
Bishop.
if you put a bishop on G7, you can't put a queen on G7, right? But if you put a
Yeah.
rook somewhere, you can still bring the queen in. So I pretty quickly, at this point, I think I only had about 8 or 10 minutes, and we're still 15 moves away from time control. So this is really crunch time.
Mhm.
And so the move that I came up with is the move rook to C3. Because with just the queen, it's difficult to mate, but if we can basically simultaneously threaten queen E3, queen H6 to G7, along with H7, right? We're going to have a battery as well. Those two threats are going to be too much for black to deal with.
Yeah. It also seems better than something like rook f3 because maybe there's queen g4 after rook f3.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want to block our own queen and give them the option to bring their queen in. So rook C3. And so my opponent plays the very natural knight B7, right? Because he's threatening to take the bishop. He's also threatening to trade rooks, right? He would love to make some trades, being the one that's under attack. But I had already realized that I have no intention of trading because when you're attacking, you attack, right? And so we play rook H3. And it's a sacrifice, but it's not really all that deep because if he does take the bishop, what do we do?
Queen D2, and worst case scenario, you can just take it back.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We threaten the knight, but actually it's much worse than that because
Queen
how does
H6.
black stop mate,
Queen
right?
E8,
If he
Queen
plays
H6.
king H8, still there's two checkmates. He can't stop both of
Mhm.
them. So at this point, the only move that I saw was for black to give up the queen for the rook, right? Because even a move like H5, what do?
Queen
Queen
h6.
H6.
We'll play queen H6,
Yeah.
right? So he would have to stack, but even still, right? I have the same
Then
threat.
queen
He would
H6
have to go
comes in.
here. At the very least, I can take the knight, and this is a winning position, right? Up a lot of material. So after knight to B7 and rook H3, he, of course, realizes the danger. He plays queen T8. Okay, so what's next here? How do we continue this attack?
Yeah, and now this plan of bishop d2, bishop
Yeah,
h6
now the
looks very
bishop.
strong.
Very
Right, so I was, again, thinking, okay, maybe we play queen E3. But, again, I saw queen F8, and I
Queen
didn't
F8.
really see how I was going to necessarily make progress because, this is going to take some time. Maybe
Mhm.
there's some H5 to even stop that. There was an option, maybe play queen E1. This is something that my opponent suggested that I didn't really consider to kind of come to H4. But still, queen F8, queen H4.
Well, can they not even take on a5 with this h5 idea in mind? Like knight a5? If queen
Yes,
h4?
potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
Although,
Yeah, and-
okay, after H5, queen
G4.
G5,
Queen
Yeah,
f8?
maybe,
okay,
but
queen
rook takes
H7, we have
H5.
rook takes H5.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
And if queen F8,
Yeah,
it's
that
still-
even after queen f8, that the attack might still be winning.
yeah, I think this should be a
That
slow
looks
winning
pretty
score.
dangerous.
But okay, yeah, I decided, you
Okay,
know what?
You can-
Again,
yeah.
why take a risk by giving up the bishop when we can actually end up using this bishop to our
Mhm.
advantage? So bishop comes back. And obviously, I mean, every white piece is pointing at the king, so he has to do something quickly. So he plays rook c2, looking to get some counterplay. And obviously pin my bishop, so I can't bring it in.
Mhm.
And so what do you guys think here? How should we proceed? How should we get out of this pin?
we should obviously put some.
What if you just played like queen G4? If they play rook takes D2, you can get a fork with queen G5 and get it on H6.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea.
That's
David.
that's pretty nice.
Queen G4. Okay, let's take a look. So queen G4. And you're saying rook takes, you want queen G5.
Yes.
Okay.
And when the rook moves away, queen H6 wins it.
So if I go king H8, you want to take this.
Yeah.
And then you're
Okay.
winning.
Okay, that's a nice idea. Let's see. Maybe black will then play.
Each.
Oh gosh.
That doesn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah, this looks,
I don't really see an easy reputation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is very.
This
aggressive.
might also win, but okay, you win this rook. Yes, it's very possible you'll come back to mate, but in the meantime, there's maybe a small chance that black can
Okay,
strung
like
together
queen
some kind of
h6.
counterplay.
Queen
Right?
h6
Queen
is
c8.
They'll keep the queen on
Looks
g8.
very
great here. Like,
Right, you have to defend your pawn. Okay, yeah, of course it's winning, but
yeah.
I felt like I don't even want to give them that option. I mean, of course, like we can't really stop him from sacrificing for the bishop at any point.
Yeah.
But I was originally thinking to play queen d3 with the idea that if he takes, then I'll go bishop h6, bishop g7 with the same idea David was suggesting. Basically sacrifice and bring the queen in, right? Like just to demonstrate. If black just makes some random moves, we're going to go here. And by the time they even attack the queen, we can already do this. Right? Threatening mate. If takes, we have check. And mate on h8. So I was thinking about that. But then I said, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I can be even more direct. And so I played the move queen e3. And this move doesn't even give black the chance to sacrifice for the bishop because queen h6 is just immediately over.
Yeah.
Right? Again, mate on g7 and mate on h7 are coming. So he has to play queen f8. Right? Again, h5, also important to notice. h5, you might be thinking, okay, then queen h6, queen f8. But again, what do we do here?
Rook h5. Yeah, and queen g5.
Yeah, we just take. Exactly.
Yeah,
because
pretty
if
nasty.
pawn ever takes, this is why the pawn on f6 is so strong, right? Is that we
Mhm.
just have a very easy checkmate idea. And if he does anything else, like here, we can, again, slide in and too many checkmates for black to cover.
yeah.
So queen e3, queen f8 is essentially forced. And of course, you know, when I played queen e3, I kind of blocked my own plan with bishop h6, bishop g7. So I must have had something in mind here. If you already saw it, maybe don't give it away yet.
I haven't seen it, but is rook
But-
takes h7 an idea?
And what's the idea, David? Like, so talk us through the variation.
King takes h7,
Okay.
queen h3 check. The king would have to come back to g8. Then you go bishop h6, driving the queen out. Then you put the bishop on g7, and it's a slower attack, but it's unstoppable.
Right. And that's the idea. Yeah, I found the move rook takes h7. And basically, okay, the threat is either to play queen h3 here or rook g7. So he takes. We go check. By this point, my opponent was already under 5 minutes because, I mean, it's very exhausting to try to defend a position like this. I mean, you're constantly about to get mated. He probably had 1 or 2 minutes left, but he actually found a move which I didn't see, queen c8. And I cannot play bishop g7 yet because, then he trades queen. So fortunately, there is queen h4. And although I'm down a rook, you know, bishop g7, queen h8 is very quickly on the way.
Unstoppable.
So to his credit, with like a minute or two, he found some tricks to create counterplay or, you know, set up some last chance for swindle. He played the move rook f2, trying to distract.
We have a question in the chat about how do you avoid getting in time trouble in tournaments? Do you have any advice for
That's a
players
good
on
question.
that?
I wish someone could give me advice on that myself. I mean, I'll say from this
Play
game,
more quickly.
yeah,
Is my
play more
thing.
quickly
Yeah.
and be the one who's attacking because it's easier to be the one attacking than the one defending. Like my opponent and I both had probably 15 minutes after 25 moves, but because I was the one in control, right, and I found some ideas that really put them under pressure, he obviously had to spend more time, right? Because this rook c3, rook h3 idea, I found in just a minute or two. But to refute this idea to try to find the right defense, that obviously takes much longer. So my advice would be to be the one attacking. But in all seriousness, it helps to not spend 20 minutes on like positional decisions like b takes c4 earlier, something that both my opponent and I could have learned from. But anyway, rook f2. So I said, okay, I can take this. So why not?
There's another interesting question in the chat about studying calculation sequences. Do you study them often? How do you study them?
That is a good question. Yeah. So for me, I find it helpful doing puzzles, of course, right? That's one way that you see a lot of these positions. Playing through master games, right, of strong attacking players like Kasparov, who we mentioned, like, you know, Shirov, take your pick, whoever you want to try to learn from. And then, of course, playing yourself, right? Playing yourself, playing some kind of attacking openings that can give you these kind of positions, and trying to, enact these ideas, trying to, of course, try to calculate, take your time during the game, try to piece these ideas together, and over time you will get better at doing that. So yeah, very important to see here. The bishop covers c1, so there's no back rank mate, but queen c3 is kind of, he's like about to draw his last breaths. He has maybe 30 seconds, but this guy is not going down without making me work for it. So queen c3, and of course the cover will go rook f1. And okay, queen d3, right? Like, as long as he's creating threats, he's not getting mated. So he's going to try everything he can. And actually, I have to be even a little bit careful, because what I realized here, and okay, this is basically the last move, right? After this move, it's game over. But if I play a move like king g1, right, just defending the rook, he can play queen d2, actually. And oops, where's my checkmate now? Right? Like, maybe I can backtrack and try to set up something like this, right? But this comes back to allowing counterplay, right? Like, even until the game is over, like, you might think, okay, this position is over. The computer is probably telling me I'm like plus 50, but you still have to stay focused. Make sure that you don't allow them any last chances, right? So how do we stop that idea with queen e2?
I must ask a question here, because I struggle with this occasionally myself. I had an interesting challenge with this in Team East. How do you play when your opponent's under time pressure? Do you try to play a little faster, try to get at them to make a mistake, or do you just stick with what you're doing and play at your normal speed?
Well, that's a good question, David. It definitely depends on the position. Like, if we're talking about this specific example, I think at this moment he had probably 30 seconds or less, and I had about 2 minutes. But I can tell you that when he played queen d3, I spent at least 1 or maybe even 1.5 out of those last 2 minutes to make sure that I don't allow any kind of last tricks, because if I find the right move, that's it. The game is over, right? But if I don't, and all of a sudden I allow some kind of crazy defense or crazy counterplay, that could cost me dearly, right? So that's why I just thought for a little bit, made sure, okay, what's the move I can play which stops any kind of counterplay? And after I played the move rook e1, he had maybe only 15 or 20 seconds, and he was not able to come up with a move in time, actually. And
What's it one?
So, I mean, the only thing he can try to do here would be to play, like, queen c3, but I'll just play bishop g7. And okay, he can give the queen for the rook, but after I take, next move I'm coming back, right? And his checkmate is right? I mean, okay, rook c8, I can always just play h3 and make sure I don't get back rank checkmated.
Yeah.
Or just queen d2.
Very embarrassing.
Yeah.
There are many interesting questions in the chat about puzzles. Like, do you solve them online or in person? Like, does that help you doing it a certain way?
Puzzles over the board as opposed to doing them online?
Yeah. Interesting.
That's a good question. I mean, of course, most tactics trainers are online. So I think, anything you do is beneficial. So I like to use Lead Chess, I like to use chess.com, but especially when you're preparing for a tournament, it can be good to set some positions up online, try to work on your kind of over-the-board vision, over-the-board calculation. I think that's something that has definitely helped me. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the game. I think we can move on to our little blitz segment here.
Yay.
Yeah. So Alan, I think, is going to come on stage. Or at least that's what he asked.
Yep, let's let him.
Alan, you're muted if you're talking. Maybe he's gone. Oh, hello.
All right.
There he is.
I'll let you go first, Brian.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a few things to say. So while you guys are loading up the blitz, so I am Alan. I am the host and the director of the show, and today we have so many viewers, much more than usual. I think that's all down to Brian and his friends watching the channel. So thank you so much. Max, also, thank you so much for your insight. I really enjoyed seeing, just going so far in depth in every single move, every single variation. But now we're going to have blitz games. So I think first is going to be Max versus David. and as they're playing, I want the audience to keep putting in their questions, and I will be asking you questions as you'll be playing the blitz match.
All right, and what time control are we doing just for the blitz?
G5.
Game 5.
G5.
Okay. So,
And then afterward, I'll challenge.
so Brian is up first.
Or is
Brian's
David?
up first.
David.
David, you're up first, right?
Yeah, I don't. You
Go
can-
first.
All right, I will send David a challenge.
Okay, good luck.
All right, it should be sent. Let me know if you don't see it, David.
Yeah,
All
on
right.
the top right.
What should we play
Watch.
against our friend David here?
It's top right, I guess.
You know, I've played David here before in some friendly games, and I can tell you that he's not one to underestimate. So,
All right, so
I'm going
Max,
to play things.
as you're playing, I'm going to start asking you questions. So unfortunately, we don't have time to have everyone in the chat get a games against Max because we are over. We're still gonna have David play his blitz game, then we'll have Brian play his game, but I can't have you guys play blitz games instead. I can have you guys ask your questions. So I'm gonna be going through the chat and making sure that everyone gets their question. But
Yeah.
first, instead of a question, we have a comment. Brian, you are amazing. Keep up the good work.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right.
All right, we have a very interesting game here already. You know, I'm treating David very respectfully, so I played one of my main openings that I play even against other masters. So we have got
I must say, I've never seen this before, so
a pretty
it
interesting
worked.
position on the board.
Pierce style. Yeah, very
We
strange.
have a comment from
Or is this a
Ansh.
black lion? Is that what? Is that?
Yes, so this
Yeah.
is my pet opening, which
Weirdness.
is something I like to refer to as the lion.
So Aunt Shaw said, "Hey guys, hopefully connect with you guys. I usually play around New Jersey." Well, it's perfect because if you go to our website, icanj.net, you can see all of our tournaments. We run tournaments every Saturday and several Sundays. So that would be a great way to connect with us.
Yeah.
Max teaches in Livingston. I am in Glenrock on Saturdays. Luke is in Glenrock Tuesdays. David's there Saturdays. Brian is sometimes there for quad Saturdays.
Yes.
I
Roman
think you guys
said,
might notice this
lion.
opening turned into somewhat of a Sicilian structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like a night orb
That
now.
was spicy, but I think I can just take the bishop.
This looks like a problem.
Okay, that's a good move. Good resource.
Okay.
all right, we got a. So just keep scrolling through the chat. Another question that I saw that I'm not sure if we covered during the stream. We have lots of really good questions from Ansh. Let's see if I can. I had a question, but I lost it.
this looks unfortunate for me.
All right. So
we're not
he asked
taking
you,
that.
Max, how do you develop your attacking instincts? Better opening, calculation, or particular puzzles?
How to develop your attacking instinct? That's a good question. Yeah, again, I think it comes back to kind of picking the kind of positions that you want to work on. Like if you want to work on your attacking instinct, of course, it's helpful to play positions like things that come out of an open Sicilian, you know, not something like the exchange French, like something that maybe gives you more of a dynamic kind of game. And yeah, try to look for ways to take the initiative, ways to attack. Of course, analyze your games. Try to see what you could do better after you do work on those things. See what you can, you know, improve and take even to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. Another
All
question we got from Daniel. Hey Max, what are your thoughts on the Bishop D3 Petrov based on your recent tournaments? Specifically, he said Eastern Chess Congress. I think he was referring to USATE.
That's a funny question. Yeah, I think I'm getting trolled a little bit here. by a little acquaintance of mine. But yeah, I think the bishop d3 Petrov is good. If you play correctly, of course.
And it seems like
that's the one.
this acquaintance of yours, he's the one that wanted to play against you on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, did he? Yeah, I know he's a very enthusiastic blitz player. He always wants to get a game in against whoever it might be.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe one of these days, enthusiastic blitz player will come on the show. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anything's possible.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting position on the board.
Yes.
There is the
Time
e6
here.
backward pawn and the doubled pawns, but black has a nice attack.
Got a question from Alexei
A little too
Sergeyev.
nice, draft me.
Max, how did you become such an inspirational figure?
That's a good question. You know, I just do what I like to do what I feel I'm good at, which is playing chess and teaching chess, and whatever comes of it.
I have a feeling next week when you're not on the show, our views are going to get cut in half. I don't know why, I just get this feeling.
You guys will just have to bring me back on at some point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh,
Whoa!
we have ourselves a pawn
A
grubber.
greedy guy.
Very greedy.
Queen takes
Okay,
b7.
Hold on a second here. Hold
Whoa.
on a second.
Hmm. Yeah, I was looking at that.
Does that work?
I was looking at that too.
Bishop on e7.
I'd like to see what you do next. This is
Roman
definitely
Rechkov
good.
says, Max, have you ever come across some b3 lines where white goes f3 and black goes knight takes e4?
Yeah, that's a funny question.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, my cat's
I
like
think I'll have to wait until after the
Yeah,
game
having
transfer.
trouble.
I'm a little too focused.
I have
Uh-oh.
a feeling
Yeah.
that's where the questions are coming from. Trying to sabotage you in some way.
Rook b2 was definitely an inspirational move, you know? At least, yeah. Whoa!
I
Hey,
think
hold
I
on.
can. I think I can escape this one. Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I might have gone in a
Okay.
little bit too soon here.
There's that, and now.
Yeah. Bank rank is a problem.
What back rank? Your back rank's perfectly fine. You have a free night.
Yep.
It's all right. We'll keep things interesting.
Now, is there increment? That's a key detail.
There is no
here.
increment.
There is
It's
no increment.
E5,
so-
no increment, no delay, nothing.
Yeah. this
Okay,
is,
wow.
Oh, this is
I'm
tense.
really gonna
Okay.
have to speed it up here.
This is tense.
So, yeah. Speaking of time control, I don't know who asked that, but
Ooh,
when
that's
your
very
opponent is
bold.
down on knight b5. Wow,
Whoa.
David is going
David
all...
is just absolutely fearless here.
Yeah. But I guess it's
Absolutely
working.
fearless.
So far.
Yeah, the rook seems to be a real
Rook
problem
tables.
here. Rook a2.
I have been following Max's rise from the start of his career in Wizards of the Mind.
Wizards of the Mind.
Wow.
Wizards of the
Is
Mind.
Who said that?
Is that like a
That was said by Roman Rechkov.
very poetic? Is that like a place?
That's actually the first school that I started playing chess. in.
Okay. Wow, that's sort
It's
of a...
not just like some pun.
Okay.
I'm a little scared, but I'm also. I don't think I'm. Although, actually, if David finds the right idea, it's trouble for me.
Thank you for telling me that.
Now you have to find it.
This is
Yeah.
I have a ton of options here though in a minute to calculate. So
that
Well, Not a-
pressure's never good.
a little less than a minute. Okay.
Now let's combine some ideas that I was thinking about here.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but now.
Actually, no, let's not bother. Let's just go for it.
Yeah. I think that'll do. And, slightly problematic here. Everything seems to be falling into place. Even,
Or out of place for some of us.
Okay,
A
now
question
I
just,
just have to avoid
Can
getting
Max
perpetual now.
pull a draw? Can Max pull a
very
draw?
nice.
Or even a win?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Really?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Oh, now this is interesting.
I'm playing a touchscreen here. This is not interesting. This is
Speed.
awful.
Black managed to escape his time pressure and put his opponent. Wow, how interesting.
Need to pick up the pace. Check. Oh, but there must be a professional. Or not.
Oh,
Uh-oh. Check.
there's another.
Check. Faster.
Oh,
Go. Check.
Wow.
Wow, what a save.
There's the-
Wow. That was,
Wow.
Wow.
What
Good
a
game.
Wow.
What
Good
a game.
game.
Wow.
Holy smokes. That
Wow.
was a good one. Good game, David.
That
Good game.
was-
Yeah, Rook takes B2 might have been a little too ambitious. I wonder if I might have messed up. I'm actually very curious. Yeah, no, it wasn't good.
Small.
What point do you want me to go to?
Wow.
What point do you want to go to, David?
All right.
What move?
No, good game. Good game.
Who, me?
David, any point of the game you want me to go back to?
I have to ask if Queen takes B7 was okay, or if I just was playing like a maniac.
Queen
think
takes
Queen
B7.
takes B7. It might have been fine. Yeah, I mean, according to the engine, it was completely fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take it.
I think later on. Here, let me tell you where exactly it went wrong. Yeah, you had Rook D6 check actually instead of G3, which, okay, G3 was still fine. Oh, actually the move which would have been a finisher is in this position after I go Bishop F6, Queen B3. Because when you're up this much material, if you can just defend your king,
Dang it.
it's game over basically, right? Like you'll play King G2 next.
That's such a
You'll shoot up
cold
your
move,
king, there's
too.
nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Oh.
Queen
Yeah.
D3.
And spark the bus,
That
get the
was-
trade.
Yeah,
That would have
exactly.
been a nice thing to spot.
Find that last little bit of defense, and that's it. It's game over.
All right.
Yeah.
I have a
All
question
right,
for you,
one
Brian.
more, I guess.
I have a question for you, Brian. You think
Yes?
you can match this?
I
I
don't
believe
know.
in you, Brian.
I don't know. I already challenged you, Max.
All right, yeah, game has begun.
Okay.
Ooh, okay, Karo Khan.
I think we saw Karo Khan from Brian the last time he was on the public stage.
The panel.
Solid opening.
I hate this line.
Pana of, right? Yeah.
Honestly, that's
So
kind of
this
Yeah,
time
I
I
have a couple
went
of
to
different
turn
lines.
off
when I
the
played
the
Kara, that was
Kara
my
was one of
favorite to
them.
play against.
E6.
You
Yeah,
like playing
okay, but
against
now
the David?
What?
You like playing against the Caro?
No, I used to play the Caro, and I enjoyed playing against Panov, but
With white against the Caro, play the fantasy.
yeah, when I played Caro, I never knew what to do against that. I probably should have studied it more, but I got kind of tired of it.
Against-
So
I actually had a
Right
game
away.
in state. I had a game
There's
where my
Bishop.
opponent played F3, and we ended up in a dead draw. And I was happy to draw an 1800.
Okay.
But it was a very sharp opening. I was scared because I was afraid because every move, one mistake, and it's over.
I'm a great
Yeah,
example
there's a
of
move
that.
here which is very tempting. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, but we might have to go for it.
All right. Let's start bringing those questions in for you, Max. Ansh struggles against the advanced variation. Any
Are we talking
tips
about-
for black and advanced Caro?
Are we talking about Bishop F5 or C5 as move 3?
Yeah.
maybe David can answer this better because he has experience as a Caro player. My experience as a Caro player dates back to when I was like 1400 probably.
I mean, I used to play c5 against it, so if we're talking about bishop f5 lines, I'm kind of useless. But if you played c5, then the queen g4 stuff was kind of nasty, and you just had to kind of avoid that.
The bishop f5, so the tall variation,
Oh,
classic.
yeah.
That one, a lot in the advanced variation against stuff like tall variation. There are some other weird ones too. Shirov variation with like knight c3, knight e2, knight f4.
Those are nightmares.
You kind of just have to know your theory. Against the short variation, which is more positional. Fun fact, by the way, about the Caro Kann. The tall variation and the short variation, named after Mikhail Tal and Nigel Short. Mikhail Tal, who was very short, and Nigel Short, who was very tall. Against that one, there's a couple different ways you have to maneuver your knights. That if you don't know about the plans, you can really get yourself in a spatial straitjacket.
You can find yourself at the height of the problem.
Look at master games for stuff like that, especially in these more positional lines where you're getting squeezed. But here in this game, the bishop on a3, I think this is a perfect example of why not to give up the dark square bishop on b4 without your opponent forcing you to with a3, right? Because when they play pawn to a3, there's no bishop a3 anymore. But now it's going to be very difficult to castle.
Yeah,
This does
Ryan Andre.
not as simple for white as it looks.
I should have waited for it.
Okay, I mean, even if you get, trying to line up a knight e7, that's still going to be very difficult. This looks problematic, to say the least.
Very problematic, unfortunately.
Bishop pair. Oh.
This will be problematic for me.
Rook b1's a really nice move.
Brian,
No,
Yeah?
knight e7.
you're Romanian?
My parents are from there. Yeah.
It's cool. I was wondering why you had the flag on your profile, but yeah, it's cool.
Thanks.
When I was in London 2 years ago, I met a couple of Romanians who I still talk to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
At my school, Stevens,
Uh-oh.
I have like 3 or 4
I have
Romanian
to
professors.
While you were in London, did you play the London?
No, I began playing the London after London.
Knight takes is actually surprisingly annoying. Surprising
Yeah,
that
and I even maybe had a better move than I missed a much better move actually than CD5.
Yeah, I was a bit scared.
I was thinking even G4 there, going for the very energetic fianchetto. If knight takes CD5 and bishop B5,
Oh, wow.
and if like and threatening G5 to kick the knight with CD5 and
Queen
bishop B5.
C2.
That's
That's
an
an
aggressive
interesting one.
one.
Yeah, it seems like the move you want to play when you have the bishops. Open the space, Grob style.
Yeah.
You might say you're grobbing some space with the pawn.
Wow.
Daniel Gersh says, "Are you aware of Victor Matvishin, one of the leading Caro Kann players?" The name rings a bell.
I mean, I was not aware that he's one of the leading experts, but that is certainly a very strong grandmaster from Ukraine. Shout out to him. All right, what
Coach Max, do you
Yes.
prefer Sicilian or a Caro as an attacking player yourself?
I mean, as an attacking player, I would have to lean towards the Sicilian.
Yeah.
If you're trying to attack with the Caro Kann, you might be looking the wrong way. Although certainly if white plays certain variations, it certainly gives black some attacking chances. Why not?
Yeah.
Some lines in the short variation where black gets to have a lot of fun. There was a Faruja beat Wesley So in a really nice game a couple years back. One of those online tournaments during the pandemic. A lot of these strange like H6, G5 setups that
Am I missing something?
I was able to play. Okay, somehow I have to say, Brian, you're holding it together better than I expected. Because
I am.
after Bishop A3, it looked like a
I
very
was gonna
difficult.
fall apart. But now time is an issue.
Yeah, time's a huge issue. After only what, 50 moves?
I feel bad about that, considering time was an issue in my game too. So I feel the pit in there.
I don't know. I was thinking about knight d4, but I was thinking that my opponent probably had something prepared, so I wouldn't calculate.
No,
that.
you're giving me too much credit.
Ouch.
Those knights are.
They're a nightmare.
I don't trust the coordination. It does not seem too comfortable.
What do you think?
I think there's. Okay, Bishop C2. Aha.
That's good.
Yeah, that's.
Not
Yeah,
good.
now. G3.
I don't know if you can enable. Not good. Otherwise, I don't need
Okay, the knights are coming to life. Wow, actually, really well
Yeah,
done
the
by
knights are-
Brian.
Good night.
Wow. Oh my God.
Good night.
my
all
time,
over.
however, is not that great.
Okay, and now all of a sudden, that bishop on A1. Oh my goodness. Oh,
I'm trying to play some moves.
the speed. Oh no, but the bishop is coming alive. This is,
Go, Brian, you have to move. 20 seconds.
yeah. But D4.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
that's
Something.
Aye.
Okay, really,
Maybe
really
if you
well
played
done though.
Queen
at the end.
takes d4, it would have been a little bit better.
yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, that was another wow.
Wow.
Not a
Two
great
very,
game by me by any stretch.
very
I feel-
strong games by both players there.
And
Yeah,
time.
very
I feel like
No,
where you
knight
played
takes
g6,
d4
you
is
could have played
definitely
knight
the most to be
f6.
played there. I think knight
Yeah,
takes
knight
d4 is
of 6
probably
is better.
very good for black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow, sharp.
I should have played bishop b5 probably to not allow that. Yeah.
I mean, knight takes d4. I should have gone for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that takes D4.
I just thought there was something there.
Yeah, the opening, I didn't like bishop takes b. I mean, okay, bishop b4 itself is fine, but if you just follow up with knight f6 or something simple, knight f6 castle, you're doing perfectly fine. But yeah, you don't want to give up your bishop if you don't have to. So that's a good lesson. I mean, that
Roman-
bishop, eventually those dark squares won the game, right? So it's a good
Mhm.
lesson for
Yeah.
that one.
You're right.
Okay, so
Alright, Roman Reichkov
people.
really wants to play you.
Yeah, people really want to play, but I think judging by these games, I should probably quit while I'm on top.
Yeah. Actually, after bishop b4, could you consider queen g4? Just throwing that out there.
Queen g4,
Wow.
interesting, kind of like a winnower type idea. Maybe.
Yeah.
Seems like a little bit too much, though. I mean, maybe black can even play knight f6. Let me take on g7 because my center
Oh,
seems
yeah.
a little bit vulnerable, right? If you go in a little bit too hungry for pawns, it could backfire.
That's true.
Yeah.
But just something simple, like my plan was knight f3, bishop d3, castles, as is typical for the Panov.
Yeah.
But yeah, bishop takes c3 definitely made things interesting.
Okay.
So
All right,
Max,
I think
Max's
we're-
fan base wants to play, but what we're going to do is, if you guys want to leave, you can. It's totally fine. But what's going to happen is, I will take on some of your fan base myself.
I think that's a great idea. I
My mind is a
enjoyed
little
the show
foggy.
very much.
Yeah.
And
All
I
right.
hope you guys will be happy to have me back on at some point.
Will you
Yeah,
still be on the
really.
stream, Alan, or
I will still, if somebody wants to challenge me, I'll be on the stream. So if you want to challenge me, what you have to do, you have to send me a friend request, and I'll accept it, and then we can play. But Max, thank you so much for being on the show. Goes without saying that you're welcome back anytime.
My
Yes.
pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
No
thank
problem.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I also have to depart. I
All
wish you
right.
guys
Thank you
luck
so much, Luke.
in your
Thank
games.
I'm sorry.
you.
As
I have
always.
to leave. Bye.
See everybody next week. Bye bye.
Yeah.
As always, I'll see you very soon.
Yes.
See you too. Bye.
Bye. I also think
Bye.
we'll have to leave. So,
Yeah. All right. Good night, Brian.
Good night to you too. Thank you.
All right. Last call. Giving you guys 1 minute. If I don't receive a friend request in 1 minute, I will log off the stream. If you want to take me on, here's my username. International Chess Academy, like our school. I'll put it in the handle. How do you friend me? So to friend me, you go to search on chess.com and you just put my name in. Or if you want, you can put your username in the chat and I can friend you. On mobile, I don't know. Put your username in the chat. Put your username in the chat. Just put your username in the chat. All right. So, let me put the account in. A player and a friend. So I'm going to challenge you right now. I'm going to challenge you to a 5-minute game. It will not be rated. And let's see. You're probably going to win because I'm minus Foggy, but let's go for it. So E4, I'll play the Caro. This might... Alright. Interesting. Very interesting. Not one of the main lines. Takes. Alright. Interesting. F3. Opens up the king, but I guess it stops any idea of knight e4. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good move. So far, not as interesting of a game as the games we saw by Max, but it's about to open up soon, I can tell you. So I see with this opponent of mine, King's safety has gone pretty much out the window, but like I said, anything can happen. Gonna be honest, I don't think that is a good move. I really don't. This pawn's now backwards. I have the initiative. You gotta move your queen. Discovered attack is on its way. Time's ticking. Interesting thought, but there's only one problem. This is now double check. And at this point now, the game's over. Now just gotta take. And at this point, yeah, this game is done. At what point did you misclick? And Maya says that she misclicked, but at what point was it? That's the question. Because there's a point in which this game was already finished after playing c5. Now I just sacked my knight, and checkmate is forthcoming. Alright, good game. And with that, I think it's time for me to go. So thank you so much to whoever for watching the stream. I will see you guys next week. And thank you so much to Max, Max's fan base, Brian's fan base, Luke, David, And soon, I don't know when, we're going to have Grandmaster Elshan, who played with us at Team East, who's going to teach classes at our school. He's soon going to be hosting a stream with me, so I look forward to it, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.